Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Game of Thrones Season 5, Episode 2, The House of Black and White. So as always, I'm giving my spoiler-free review of the latest episode of Game of Thrones. By spoiler-free, I mean I will not get into spoilers from the books or any other kind of spoilers, so long as you've seen up to Season 5, Episode 2. So this episode begins with Arya Stark arriving in Braavos. This was a really cool shot as we get to see more of Braavos as the ship captain took Arya in a little rowboat across the city, which seems to be modeled after Venice, as boats seem to be the main course of transportation in the city. The captain takes Arya right to the House of Black and White and parts in good terms. But Arya isn't greeted very warmly there and basically told to go away. So she just sits in front of these steps all night reciting her list of names of people she wants to kill until she gives up, throws the coin Jake and Hagar had given her into the water and leaves. So what's interesting to note here is, if you recall back to Season 2 when Arya first met Jake and Hagar, she gave him names of who she wanted to kill, and he killed them. And when they parted ways, Jaqen told her that if she went to Braavos with him, he would teach her how to kill the remaining names of people who she still wanted to kill. But at the time she didn't go because she wanted to find her mother and her brother. But now that they're dead, she decided she wanted to go to Braavos to seek Jake and Hagar, so he could train her. So saying those names on her list takes a bit of a new meaning here, as she's being denied access to the place where she thinks she's going to get training that she needs to kill these people. What's also really noteworthy about this scene is her list has gotten significantly smaller since Season 4, Episode 5, where her list contained 11 names, where now, in this episode, it only contains 4 names. The 4 names currently on her list are Cersei Lannister, Walder Frey, The Mountain, and Meereen Trant. Cersei, of course, she's mad at for her role in killing her father, amongst other things. Walder Frey, of course, was responsible for killing her mother and brother and decimating their armies. The Mountain held her captive at Harrenhal, where he did horrible things to his prisoners. And Meereen Trant, as far as she knows, is responsible for killing her first mentor, Syrio Forel. So, what names are missing from her list that were in Season 4? Well, we have Joffrey, Tywin Lannister, the Red Woman, Melisandre, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, Ilyn Payne, and the Hound. Now, the first 2 names easy to eliminate are Joffrey and the Hound, because she learned of Joffrey's death from those horrible would-be assassins, and she left the Hound for dead. So she doesn't need to worry about them anymore. Another person on her list you might note that has died is Tywin Lannister. However, I question whether she would know this, since this happened around the same time she left for Braavos, and she's been on this boat the whole time. But I suppose perhaps the captain knew before they left and told her about it. I somehow doubt it, but whatever. And so that leaves Melisandre, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, and Ilyn Payne. Now, she's mad at the first 3 because Beric and Thoros sold her friend Gendry to Melisandre, whom she was sure would do no good to him. But I suppose now she all of a sudden doesn't really care about that anymore. And Ilyn Payne was the man who physically killed her father. I'm not sure why she'd all of a sudden leave him out and still include the Mountain, who didn't really do anything to her or anyone she loved personally. So it seems to me that now that the show is just having her focus on the people still relevant to the show, as we aren't likely to see Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, or Sir Ilyn Payne on the show again. Or at least anytime soon. And I guess if they leave Thoros and Beric out, they also have to leave out Melisandre, because she's mad at her for the same reasons. So I personally think that those 4 names that they chose to focus on in this episode will have relevance for Arya's storyline in the future, and that's why they chose to focus on those 4 names and drop the others. But that's just my speculation. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but we'll see. So next we see Podrick and Brienne getting some grub at an inn, and then we see that Littlefinger and Sansa just happen to be eating at the same time at the very same inn. And just when you think this is going to be another near miss like we got in the previous episode, this time Podrick spots Sansa and points her out to Brienne, who goes over and pledges her services to her, but it doesn't go so well, and it ends with Brienne and Podrick having to fight their way past some Vale soldiers. So I didn't really care for this scene very much, as I thought it was just a carbon copy of the scene in Season 4 where Brienne and Podrick confront Arya and the Hound. It plays out almost exactly the same as that scene did, beat for beat. Podrick identifies a Stark girl to Brienne, who pledges to protect that Stark girl, but the older male companion of the Stark girl is untrusting of Brienne and points out that she's dressed in Lannister clothing, suggesting she's working for the Lannister. The Stark girl then refuses to go with Brienne, leaving Brienne to fight off the Stark girl's older companion, or as the case may be, soldiers who serve the Stark girl's older companion. So basically, beat by beat, it's the same thing, just presented differently. So I did get a sense of deja vu when watching this scene. I don't particularly appreciate things being repeated. But, to be clear, I'm not saying I hated the scene as much as I'm saying I hated the scene with Brienne confronting Arya and the Hound. I actually think it worked much better here, where I didn't think it worked that well in the Season 4 finale. And I did talk about this at length in my review for that episode, as well as a couple other videos I did, because I thought it was out of place that Arya would so refuse to go with Brienne, because she's, really seemed to identify with her, and obviously didn't like the Hound because she ended up leaving him for dead, so it doesn't really make sense to me why she wouldn't jump at the chance to get rid of him. Whereas here, Sansa doesn't know or identify with Brienne. She saw Brienne at Joffrey's wedding, bowing to him. She trusts Littlefinger's judgment and ability to read people. So when he points out that Brienne has Lannister gold, she would believe him. And of course, Littlefinger would want to get rid of Brienne because she's an unknown element that could interfere with his plans. Whereas the Hound's dismissal of Brienne was based on him wanting to take care of Arya, which seems a bit dubious considering what she did to him next. So to be clear, when I say this scene was repetitive, I'm not saying they shouldn't have done this scene. I'm saying they shouldn't have done the first scene with Brienne and the Hound, which I've railed against ad nauseum, and some of you might be sick of hearing me say it. But I'll say it one more time because it's relevant here. If they never did that scene in the first place, then this scene would not seem so repetitive, and this is the better scene out of the two that makes much more sense for the characters and for the story. Anyway, Brienne defeats the Knights of the Vale, as we knew she would, because she's a badass, and she even manages to save Podrick, who sucks at riding horses. It was cool to see her Valyrian sword in action, as we often hear so much about how awesome Valyrian steel is, but rarely see it put into action. But here Brienne uses her sword to slice right through the other knight's swords, cutting it in half and then killing him. So that was cool to see. So next, Brienne is determined to follow Sansa despite the fact that Sansa doesn't want her help. So next, we get a scene where Cersei shows Jaime a snake's head in the box with Marcella's necklace in its mouth. So Cersei had obviously already seen the snake's head because she acted like she knew the contents of the box, and yet when Jaime comes in, he had to open this special box that seemed to instantly fall apart when opening. So the thing I want to know is, did Cersei reassemble the box after seeing the snake's head just so Jaime could come in and dramatically open the box again? Seems a bit silly to me, but whatever. Anyway, this scene is really interesting because I believe it's the first time that Jaime acknowledges that Cersei's children are his children when he says he'll go to Dorne and save his daughter. He's obviously feeling guilty about freeing Tyrion, which led to Tywin's death, so it makes sense that he'd be all gung-ho about going to save Myrcella and, trying to get back on Cersei's good graces. So after that, we see Bronn walking along with his new wife-to-be, obviously not really caring about, what she's talking about. What's interesting here is we already know from last season that Bronn planned to kill Lolly's sister so that Lolly's and her new husband, which would be him, would inherit her family's castle. But here, Bronn sort of implies to her that that he's going to kill her sister. He doesn't outright say it, but I think he makes his intentions crystal clear by saying stuff like, "Ooh, bad things happen to bad people all the time." But the funny thing is when he mentioned it, Lolly's was smiling, like hugely smiling. I don't think that's out of character. I think that works fine, but it was different than what I was expecting, because when Bronn first mentioned his plans in season 4, I was thinking that Lolly's might not be so happy about him killing her sister, but to find out here that she's all for it, which is that's interesting. But all that doesn't really matter because Jaime comes along and tells Bronn Lolly's is marrying someone else, and that if Bronn goes on a mission with him to Dorne, he'll give Bronn a better wife and a better castle. Bad news for Lolly's, but good news for her sister, I guess. Anyway, I'm surprised Bronn accepted this deal without knowing exactly who the better wife and what the better castle is. As Bronn said to Tyrion last season's if, ands, and maybes don't really mean all that much. But maybe Jaime told him off screen. I don't know. Anyway, next scene, we do see Dorne, where Myrcella, who like Tommen in the previous season, has been recast with an older actor. She's walking through some beautiful gardens with her betrothed, Trystane Martell, a prince of Dorne. However, we see Ellaria Sand, who was Oberyn's paramour, who traveled with him to King's Landing in the previous season, looking quite pissed off at this. Ellaria then confronts Prince Doran Martell, ruler of Dorne, and suggests that they kill Myrcella for revenge for Oberyn's death. Doran's not okay with this, and apparently is just happy to sit there and do nothing, which Ellaria is not too happy about. It's funny that this scene is kind of a callback to the previous season where Oberyn assured Cersei that Myrcella was safe in Dorne because he said they don't hurt little girls in Dorne. To which Cersei replied that they hurt little girls everywhere. Because Doran pretty much said we don't hurt little girls here, to which Ellaria seemed to disagree with, almost proving Cersei's point. So next we go to Meereen, where Daario gives Grey Worm a lecture on why he's better at finding people than him, which basically leads to the fact that he's found the man responsible for killing White Rat in the previous episode. So they break into his home, and there apparently is no one, but then Daario then further lectures Grey Worm on why he's better than him by putting a knife through the wall, thus revealing the killer was hiding in the wall. So my question is, was this dude spending the whole day hiding inside a wall? I guess it's possible he heard, the Grey Worm coming, but if he had some intel that they were out looking for him and they wanted to hide, you think that he would just leave his house rather than just hide between the walls, but whatever. Anyway, I like these little reactions between Daario and Grey Worm. We got a couple in season 4, and it's good to see the interactions between Daenerys' advisors when she's not there. So next we see Daenerys' new advisor, the former slave, advising Daenerys to kill the son of the Harpy, but Sir Barristan suggests a fair trial. A couple of things interesting about this scene. First off, Hizdahr zo Loraq appears to be on Daenerys' council as well. I suppose he's the representative of the former masters, as the other man represents the former slaves. And secondly, Barristan tells Daenerys about her father and what he was like, and I think this is the first time she heard it. because you have to understand that everything Daenerys heard about her father mostly came from her brother Viserys, who of course lied and put his own spin on things to make Targaryens look perfect and better. So it was interesting that Barristan told her the truth, and more interesting that she believed him without question. I suppose at this point she really trusts Barristan. So because of that, she decides to give the accused killer a fair trial. Next we go to the road to Volantis, where Tyrion and Varys are trapped in an extravagant carriage where Tyrion is going a little stir crazy and just wants to go outside. First off, is it just me, or does the interior of the carriage look way too huge to actually fit inside the exterior of this carriage? I mean, it looks gigantic. I understand that Illyrio is rich, so they would have a lot of resources, but this looks way overdone. Anyway, in this scene, Tyrion keeps to his word about drinking himself to death and makes a few clever jabs. I particularly like when Varys asks him if he's really going to spend the whole trip pointing out the futility of everything, to which Tyrion replies, "You're right, there's no point." It took me a little while to get that, but he was basically being ironic because he was saying even that was futile, thus he was continuing to point out the futility of everything. I love it. Anyway, as always, I love scenes with Tyrion and Varys. They're always a joy to watch. And this scene, Varys points out how good Tyrion was at being handed the king back in Season 2. And this is something I often point out, as I say Season 2 is one of my favorite seasons because Tyrion was such a badass and so good at being handed the king. And I kind of miss that aspect of him. So, the scene ends with Varys telling Tyrion he can't leave the carriage because Cersei has people all over the world looking for him, trying to kill him, and Tyrion's like, oh, can it really be that bad? Then jump to the next scene where two killers bring Cersei the head of a random dwarf. So yes, it can really be that bad. However, Cersei doesn't punish them for bringing her the wrong head because she doesn't want to discourage others from looking for Tyrion, which in my opinion is a very smart move on her part. But then the creepy Qyburn asks if he can keep the head for his experiments. I'm not sure what he would need a severed head for, and I'm not sure I want to know, but it certainly adds to the creepiness of this dude. Next, we go to the small council meeting where Cersei is naming the new small council, which of course she names herself as head of the small council, proclaiming that until Tommen comes of age, they don't need a hand of a king, and she as queen regent will fulfill those duties typically associated with that position. Of course, Pycelle and Mace Tyrell both plead to become hand, but Cersei ignores them both. She appeals to Mace Tyrell's ego by giving him lots of compliments and makes him master of coin as well as master of ships, which the bumbling idiot he takes as a compliment, but really Cersei is trying to just make him so busy that he's too busy to meddle in other affairs. She also names Qyburn to the council as the new master of whisperers, to which Pycelle isn't happy about, but again, Cersei doesn't care. So then she names her uncle Kevan Lannister as master of war. But Kevin refuses, stating he doesn't want to be her puppet. And like his brother, Kevin is a smart man. He's reading the situation pretty well. Unlike Mace Tyrell and Pycelle, who are idiots, he sees what's going on here, that this is basically Cersei's power grab, plain and simple. Now that her father's dead and he isn't there to stand in her way, this is her chance to obtain true power. Cersei wants Kevin there not because she values him as much, but because it validates her position to have the head of the Lannister forces serving as her master of war. Kevin, of course, sees through this and so refuses to take part in it. He does have a line where he says Cersei is stacking the small council with sycophants, which I think applies more to the books than the show, because in the books, the small council has always consisted of more people than it did in the show, and Cersei did indeed line the council with a whole bunch of yes men willing to do whatever she said in the books. But in the show, she only added one, Qyburn. But I suppose Mace Tyrell could be considered a sycophant, even if Cersei obviously considers Tyrell's enemies, he's still a bumbling idiot who would just want to suck up to whoever's in charge, and thus is easy to control. So Kevin made it perfectly clear that he would not be one of them. So next we go to the Wall, where we see Shireen teaching Gilly how to read. I really liked this scene. It made perfect sense that Shireen would get along with Gilly and Sam, and it's interesting that Gilly might learn how to read. But then, of course, Shireen's bitch of a mother, Selyse, comes in and tells her to stay away from Gilly. God, I hate her. In my top 10 least favorite characters video, I named Selyse my number 3 least favorite character on the show, and I'm starting to feel more strongly about this. Every time I see her, she's just so annoying. So, next we get a scene with Stannis and Braavos talking to Jon Snow. It's always awesome to get scenes with these characters together, and I can never get enough of it. Stannis offers to make Jon a full Stark and the Lord of Winterfell. This is what Jon had always wanted his whole life, and I'm sure earlier he would have jumped at the chance, but now he's sort of entrenched in the Night's Watch and couldn't really imagine leaving it, and he knows if he did do this, he would have to pledge his loyalty to Stannis, and the status of being the Lord of Winterfell and a Stark would only be legal if Stannis won the war as the true king of Westeros. And Stannis on his part, of course, would just be using him in order to gain the support of the North, because many of the noble lords of the North refuse to support him because they only want to support a Stark. So if he had a Stark on his side, he would make it easier for him to gain the support of the North, which would go a large way to winning the Seven Kingdoms. But in the very next scene, Jon tells Sam that he will refuse Stannis' offer because the Night's Watch is his home now, and then the Night's Watch then have an election to decide who will be the next Lord Commander, to which Alliser Thorne is seen as the likely shoe-in. His only competitor is Denys Mallister, a really old man who commanded the Shadow Tower. In fact, an interesting fact is the actor who played Denys Mallister died when shooting these episodes, so apparently he was originally meant to appear in more scenes, but then died before they could film them. And the producers decided, partly out of respect and partly because they liked the actor for the part, that they wouldn't recast the character and would just work with the scenes that they had. So it does make me curious what the other scenes he would have been in, because for now he's actually what the industry would refer to as a featured extra. Cast member is anyone who has a line of dialogue. If you don't have a line of dialogue, you're considered an extra. But if you feature prominently on the screen, for example having your own close-ups, then you're considered a featured extra. At any rate, it seems the Night's Watch felt Denys Mallister was too old to be Lord Commander, so Alliser Thorne was favored to win, until Sam decides to speak up against Jon's wishes and nominate Jon Snow for the position. I mean, really, who watching this didn't see this one coming? But at any rate, Sam makes an impassioned speech on Jon's behalf, and when Janos Slynt speaks out against him, Sam points out that Janos was hiding in the cellar with Gilly during the Wildling battle, and everyone had a good laugh at this, and I loved this. I particularly loved that Maester Aemon also cracked a big smile. That really cracked me up. So anyway, Sam points out that Jon took control of the Wall's defenses after Alliser had fallen and led them to victory, and risked his own life on a mission to kill Mance Rayder. Sir Alliser retorted by accusing Jon of loving the Wildlings, as he was known to have loved the Wildling girl, and he mercy killed Mance when he was slowly burning to death. So it was a close race. In fact, the vote ended up being tied between Alliser and Jon until Maester Aemon cast his vote for Jon, making him the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Personally, it seemed odd to me that Maester Aemon would be allowed to vote after the voting had officially been counted and the time for voting was over. Seems like kind of cheating to me, but whatever. So then we go back to Braavos, where Arya is confronted in the streets by a group of street ruffians who approach Arya for her sword. Now, it is a custom in Braavos that if you openly carry a sword through the streets, then you're sort of fair game to be challenged to a duel. And at first I thought this was what was happening here, but upon further examination, I'd say these three did, look more like typical thieves who wanted to steal Arya's sword because they talked about how much the sword would be worth. She confidently warned them to go away or they died. This didn't seem to deter them, but then the same old man who we saw earlier at the House of Black and White appears, and that is enough to scare them off. I personally wanted to see Arya take on and kill these street ruffians, but maybe 3 would be too much for her to handle, and she was just being overconfident. Anyway, she follows the old man back to the House of Black and White and confronts him, asking who he is. The man then changes his face to reveal the face of the character we knew as Jaqen H'ghar from Season 2. Arya asks why she was told Jaqen H'ghar isn't here, to which he answers that he isn't Jaqen H'ghar, he is no one, and that she must also become no one. He then lets her into the House of Black and White. First off, I loved this scene. I was cheering when I saw the face of Jaqen H'ghar, and it was so nostalgic to hear the strange way he talks. A man is not Jaqen H'ghar, a man is no one, and that is what a girl must become. I absolutely love that. Anyway, some may take the fact that he says he isn't Jaqen H'ghar to mean that he literally isn't the same character that we saw in Season 2. It's just someone else wearing the same face. But I personally think it is the same character. However, what he meant by he's not Jaqen H'ghar is that the faceless men must renounce all identity. So basically, he's no one, and if she wants to be a faceless man, she must also become no one. But it is the same guy. So finally, we get back to Meereen to finish off the episode where the former slave on Daenerys' council takes it upon himself to kill the captured son of Harpy. Daenerys, having defied her orders, feels she has no choice but to publicly execute him, and this incites a riot between the former slaves and the former masters of Meereen, as this is a city very much divided. So in my top 10 favorite characters videos, I named Daenerys my favorite character, but stated I understood that there was a lot of hate out there for her, and it's times like these I understand the hate for her, and I find it a bit hard to defend her. Something I noticed in Season 4 is that she kept making what I thought were really stupid decisions. First with crucifying the Masters at random, then by exiling Jorah, and then by locking up her dragons, and now this is what I personally think is the stupidest mistake she's made yet. I mean, what the hell is she doing? The Sons of Harpy are going around killing her people, and she responds by killing a former slave on her council. That does not at all look good. Of course, all the former slaves at the hearing were calling for mercy, and after she killed him, they all hissed at her and eventually started throwing rocks at her. It is not a good sign. I mean, Daenerys, I love you, but what the hell are you doing? The Masters already hate her because she invaded their city and took away their power, and now she's going to piss off the other part of the population that actually liked her. Not a smart move. Plus, I don't see why it's so important for the Harpy to receive a fair trial. I mean, he was found with knives and the Harpy mask. Seems pretty obvious he did it. After all, she didn't give the former slave a fair trial. She just had him executed. So now is where I see where Varys is coming from, because Daenerys desperately needs someone as clever and good at playing the Game of Thrones on her side as Tyrion. I mean, at the moment she has Grey Worm, who's an excellent battle commander, but as Dario demonstrated earlier, he's not that clever at interior tactics or politics. And then there's Dario, who is too much of a scoundrel and thinks everything can be solved with bloodshed. And then there's Barristan, who suffers from the same flaws that Ned Stark and Robb Stark did by being too honorable rather than clever. In fact, this situation reminded me a lot of when Robb Stark beheaded Rickard Karstark for killing the Lannister boys. Yes, it was the honorable thing to do because because he disobeyed his orders and killed someone, but beheading him was so stupid because it alienated a large chunk of his army, forcing him to turn to the Freys, who ended up killing him. So Daenerys, advised by Dario and Barristan, is being just as stupid here by alienating her only support base in the city. She needs Tyrion, and she needs him badly. I only hope that she'll listen to him and that he gets there before she totally fucks everything up. So finally, we get to the scene where Drogon comes by and says hi. Daenerys reaches out to him, but he of course just flies off. Maybe he doesn't want to be locked up in a dungeon, and who could blame him? At any rate, he's freaking huge now. The dragons grow bigger each season, and now he is one mean-looking dragon. When Daenerys reaches out her hand to him, I'm like, God, you're brave. That thing would scare the shit out of me. So, my overall rating for the House of Black and White is an 8. Extremely good. There were some scenes in here I didn't like the repetitive Brienne scene, but there were a lot of great moments, like seeing the return of Jake and Hagar. Finally, Jon Snow being elected Lord Commander, getting to meet Doran Martell, watching Cersei's power grab, and seeing Daenerys' downfall deepen. So that's it for my review of the House of Black and White. You should check out my channel and subscribe for many other Game of Thrones videos. If you have read the books, be sure to check out my discussion with Apkin Tomko about this episode, which we'll do in a few days. That will be over on his channel, Apkin Tomko. But there'll be a link to it in my channel page as well under the Discussions with Apkin Tomko playlist. And be sure to join me next week for my review of episode 3, and thanks a lot for watching.